This is the Minding Your Own Business podcast, brought to you by Elder Research. Each episode will bring in data and analytics gurus from around the world as they regale us with their data analytics stories and enlighten us with their secrets for how to turn data into actionable insights. Now, here's our host, Evan Wimpy, who will guide us as we dare to mind our own business.
Hello and welcome to the Minding Your Own Business podcast. I'm your host, Evan Wimpy, and today I'm super excited to introduce our guest, Derek Camp from Milo's Tea. Derek's a senior manager of operations analytics there, and for all the Milo tea drinkers out there, which hopefully is everybody, should be everybody, you've got Derek and his team to thank for helping make sure that Milo's is on the shelf wherever you go to buy your Milo's tea. Derek, thanks so much for joining us on the show today.
Well, thank you, Evan. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Derek, to get started, can you just tell us a little bit about your background, how you got into the role where you are now?
I've been with Milo's Tea for just over 11 years. And I started out as a replenishment analyst. I made sure that we had the right amount of product at the right place at the right time for our largest customer. And that role sort of morphed into a sales analytics role. So you did a little bit of replenishment, a little bit of sales analytics. You helped the sales team. And I did that for about 4 years and then moved to operations about 7 years ago and focused on logistics analytics, and then slowly started doing work with quality and doing a little work with supply chain, doing a little work with operations. And, you know, over time, it just kind of grew. And so now I have a team of analysts, and we cover a lot of operations.
Fantastic. You touched on a handful of the like rolling them off and quality and logistics. Can you dive, maybe just give us sort of like a one sentencer on each of the areas that falls under operations?
So the four main areas are logistics, supply chain. We say operations, it kind of covers operations, production, CI, maintenance, and then quality. And so each one has its own set of metrics, and we have an analyst dedicated to those areas. We dabble a little bit in inventory as well, and we actually do a little bit of people analytics as well.
Oh, all right. And your role focuses on analytics in that space. To do analytics, we need some kind of data. Can you talk about the data that you have access to or that your team uses there?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you a few examples from each area. So in logistics, one of the big things we look at is OTIF. And OTIF, if you don't know, it sits in logistics, but it's really more of a customer service metric, but it's on time and in full. It's how you're serving your customer. And so you order 1,000 cases of Sweet Gallon due this Thursday. If you have to cut product, that cuts your in full rate. If you're late, then you're not on time. And so anytime that we make a change to a PO, whether we have to take product off or we have to change a date or our carrier is late, we have reason codes that we put into our ERP. And, for every Monday that comes through, we put in the reason codes, and we're able to do an analysis and look at it to say, if we had 20 late POs, 10 of them were due to weather, whether it was the wintertime and you're going over the Rockies and you hit road closures or a snowstorm, that's something that can be explained. Or if there's a hurricane in the mid-Atlantic states, that can be explained. But if there's something that, that we did, maybe we had unplanned downtime on a production line, then, we look at that and say, is that a one-off thing, or do we need to look at that a little bit more closely? So that's how, just a really brief example of how we use it in logistics. In supply chain, we look at it in terms of, in supply chain, it's direct materials and indirect materials and category plans and things like that. And direct materials for us is anything that goes into the finished product. And so we have a plan, and we look at the monthly cost, and are we favorable on jugs or caps or labels? And if we are, what drove that? If we're not favorable on something, we have to get a shovel and start digging into why we weren't favorable. And, the things we are favorable for, what things can we repeat? And the things that are not favorable, what what do we need to fix? And so that's not repeatable. And I always like to joke about the indirect. For us, it's anything from pins to palletizers. And so, having category plans for all of that, we're using data to divide everything out into categories. And for our production, we have a metric called OEE. It's basically the how efficient is your line running. And, we will look at the OEE score and we will delve into, what's causing it to be that way. Is it hitting plan? Is it below plan? We start looking at that individual line, or we'll look at a shift and say, shift A is doing this really well, but shift B is not, and then delve into what's happening with shift B and try to correct that.
Yeah, I think that paints a really good picture. It also paints a pretty complex picture. You've got, you think about on the analytics world, doing the technical work and doing the analysis, but then you think communicating that and sharing that with a stakeholder. And it sounds like your stakeholders are sort of all over the place. You're not talking on time in full to the same people you're talking OEE with. Do you try to maintain those relationships sort of across all aspects where you're analyzing their data?
Oh yeah. I mean, a good example of that is we were looking at one line, and we knew that looking at data was only going to give us one side of the story. And so we pulled together the analytics people, we pulled together the CI people, continuous improvement. We pulled a maintenance engineer in, and we pulled all the production supervisors in. And we said, okay, this line is not doing this line's not really living up to potential. Why are we doing that? And we got everybody's viewpoint from that. And in that meeting, if something came up, the maintenance engineer would say, okay, I know how to handle this. I can go study, look at the machine. We adjusted a PM, and that was all on him. But maybe the CI person wrote an SOP, and the production people were able to add in details to us that we never would have knew. And so we try to reach out across all the lines to get everybody's point of view on it. And, there'll be times where we're looking at, the production numbers, and we bring in the logistics team and say, okay, like you're going to be backed up, a couple of trucks, because we're having to do some either extended runs, or we're going to have to take this machine down because this particular machine has downtime. And so you need to make adjustments on your plan in logistics. So, talk to the carrier, don't come in right now, come in 2 hours later. And in most cases that works out pretty well.
Yeah. I love that. I love the way you talk about sort of the end state there is not, here's the analytics, but here are actionable things. Here are things that you can do based on whether it's new maintenance to help improve some OEE, whether it's logistics, adjusting the timing. There's actionable things that somebody can take away from that, which is great. Do you ever, anytime the data suggests some action, there's a potential for some pushback or defensiveness? Do you ever get folks that maybe struggle to incorporate your analysis or your team's analysis?
Sometimes. I mean, it doesn't happen as often as you think. I think for ops as a whole, everybody has that one tunnel vision of, okay, like we've got this many cases we have to make, and we have to make them. We're not going to sacrifice customer service or anything like that. And whatever we have to do, we're going to go do. Now, there'll be some people that will not like a suggestion, but it's never done in, they're never, for the lack of a better term, they're never mean about it. But we try to work together and say, if you don't like that, what are you suggesting that we do? And, we've got people here that have got a lot of experience, and sometimes I've walked in thinking this is the right way to go do this, and I've talked to a certain person and I've walked out going, okay, that's the better way to go do it, just because he knows that machine better than I do.
That's such a good attitude to have. I hope our audience that are on the data practitioner side can adopt that, of your data can suggest things, can help highlight things, but you have to be open to other subject matter experts having an opinion, having ideas of how to improve whatever the data is highlighting there.
Yeah, I mean, you're only getting one side of the data, and that's why developing relationships with SMEs are so important.
Perfect. Love it. Derek, I've not thought too much about this. You're located in Alabama physically. Where you work out of?
I'm in Birmingham, Alabama. That's where we're headquartered.
Okay, perfect. I'm not as deep in the South, but I'm in North Carolina, still solid sweet tea country. And so I'm curious, I've never really thought about it. Does Milo's tea, how broad sort of is the offering? I'm a sweet tea drinker, and that sort of seems popular in the South. Are there other offerings? Is there a wide product offering, and is it across the rest of the country as well, your footprint?
We make different flavors of tea. So we've got sweet tea, which is our most popular. We have extra sweet tea. That's one of our newer items. We have a no calorie tea. We have an unsweet tea. We have a lemonade, and then we have a tea and lemonade mix. And we just recently we went to all 50 states.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we're not in every single retailer, but we're working on it. But we have a presence somewhere in all 50 states.
Oh, congratulations. And I hope your team's up for the challenge. I'd imagine that comes with big footprint, comes with a lot more data and a lot more operational challenges.
Yeah, I mean, I've been with Milo's for 11 years, and when I started, we had one plant in Alabama, and we had one shift. That was it in the plant. And then now, 11 years later, we have 2 facilities in Birmingham. We have a plant that runs in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and we are about to open another plant in South Carolina.
Wow. Yeah, the growth, that's exciting.
Yeah, so it went from, okay, what's the one plant doing that, what's the data for the one plant, to now it's going to be, when something comes up, okay, you did it for this plant, you have to do it for 3 more. So yeah, it can be challenging at times.
Yeah, for sure. I wonder, perhaps the multiple plants, at least if they're producing roughly the same thing, or there's some overlap in what they produce, it can give you sort of a baseline too. If one plant has production or OE at a certain level, it's hard to know what to compare that against. But when you've got multiple plants, maybe is it easier to see where to point for improvements?
I mean, yeah, you don't want to, I guess there is always that natural comparison between the 2 plants, but the plant that I'm in right now, this plant is considerably older than the plant in our Tulsa location is 4 years older. It's 4 years old. And so, it's got, the machinery is more advanced and more, it's newer.
Sure.
And so, they're able to run, more efficiently than we are, just because we're an older plant. So while there is competition between the 2, whenever we look at numbers, we're like, okay, you really got to compare it to its own plant.
Gotcha.
For the most part. Now, I'm not saying that, there's not any comparison done, but it has to be taken in the right context.
Sure. Yeah. You've got to have a handicap on the Birmingham plant there.
Right.
Perfect. Okay. That's super helpful. Derek, you've been at Milo's for 11 years, and you've got some background in different areas. You've now got a team. Can you tell a bit about the composition of your team, sort of how many, and are most of them coming directly into your team, or have they moved somewhere from Milo's in the business to come to your team?
So I have 4 analysts on my team, and 3 of them were internal transfers from another department, and one was hired from the outside. And that's the people who came from other departments have really brought that they've seen the company from a different perspective. And so that really helps out. And then it also helps that they know people in other departments. And if a question comes up, if you're new, you're like, I don't know who all these people are in sales, or I don't know who these people are. And when I came over from sales, if I had a question, I knew exactly who to call and picked up the phone. And that's how, the 2 people on my team that came from sales, they all have friends still back in sales. And if they need to call them, they pick up the phone and call them. But one great example of this is our person who does our quality analytics. He actually started in driving a forklift on the floor, and so he moved in from driving a forklift into scheduling the plant. And when the quality job came open, he applied, and it was like, okay, he knows the process of how we make our tea better than anybody else from the outside that would come in. Now, was he trained and had a great analytics background? No, but we hired him on because he had that really good knowledge of the process. And we just knew that we would just have to train him in analytics a little bit. But I've been on calls with him, and he has rattled stuff off about quality and the process and how this works that I didn't even know. So, I mean, having that knowledge from other departments sometimes is priceless.
Yeah, absolutely. We often talk about knowing the data generation process. So you're working with data, you're working in a spreadsheet or a tabular file or flat file all the time. It's a bunch of zeros and ones, but really understanding the context where the data comes from gives you so much power, much more than knowing a new algorithm or the most efficient way to use your visualization tool. So
that's right.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Is there, besides just experience within the business, is there anything in particular, Derek, that you look for when you're looking to bring folks onto your team, either from external or within other departments?
I think there's 6 things, and I kind of break them up into 2 groups of 3. And the first is, I always say that if our team is doing these 3 things, we're doing our job really well. So reporting, automating, and generating actionable insights, like you mentioned earlier. How do you know if you're winning? You look at the scoreboard. And so every week we do KPIs, and we take the data and we see if we're winning. The automation allows you to use Power BI or use Excel, whatever you're using, to visualize. And it's not just for KPIs. It's, if the logistics manager calls you and says, hey, I'd like to look at everything from the West Coast, can you just pull some data together? And yeah, I can go pull it together and automate you something that you can refresh for the next 4 weeks, depending on what you want to look at. But the last thing is probably the most important thing, is the generating actionable insights, which reporting and automating kind of leads into that. But what I tell people is not everybody has the want to do that, because you have to get a shovel out and start digging and figuring out, what's causing this to be 5% down week over week or 5% down year over year. And, a lot of times the answer is not straight in front of you. And so the willingness to dig, I found that some people like to do it and some people don't like to do it. And you really want to find out, if you're going to be an analyst here, is, do you want to dig? And you have to dig to figure this out. And to me, that's kind of my personality and how I kind of grew up doing analytics for the past 11 years, is just digging in and finding things. So it's so important. And the other 3 things are, you've got to have domain knowledge. Now, that's not a deal breaker, but you've got to be able to learn it. When I moved and worked in logistics, I didn't know anything about logistics, but I learned, about logistics. Number 2, you need to have some sort of technical skills. Again, if you're teachable, that's great. So whether it's SQL, whether it's Power BI, whether it's Excel, you got to have something like that to be able to take the data and manipulate it to whatever you want it to show. But this one's the big one. This last one is, you have to have soft skills, because you're not working in a vacuum. You're working with people. And, I've saw on LinkedIn one time that being easy to work with is a superpower. And also saw that, nobody wants to work with you if you're hard to work with. And so being able to take the data and communicate it to people, and to, in some cases, get buy-in to fix whatever it is, not everybody has that, as well as generating actionable insights. And so if you've got a good mix of those 6 things, then you're probably going to be a good analyst. And that's sort of the things that I look for.
Yeah, I think that's a great list to have. It sounds like a lot of it almost revolves around curiosity. If you've got somebody who wants to dig into it, they need to be naturally curious about the data.
Yes.
They come to you with no Power BI experience, but they're willing to learn. They're just curious. How does this work? What can it do for me? What can I show with it? But yeah, and absolutely, like soft skills, the most actionable insights in the world don't come from a presentation, don't come from a printed piece of paper. They come from a person. If you can't talk to a stakeholder and get some action, then they're useless. It's a paperweight. So
I've seen so many chats in offices that turn into great ideas. So having those soft skills can't replace that.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I think that's a really good list. You've given us a list of the things in your team that would be nice to have, that's good for your analyst to have. You've got very broad scope of the types of things that you're looking at within operations there. In the dream scenario where all the reporting is done perfectly, things are running where they should, and you get to either you yourself or your team point to something new and as flexible as you want, whatever you want to work on that maybe hasn't been looked at very much. And everybody's on board. Everybody at Milo says, yes, Derek, take this, run with it. Is there a thing that you would say, yes, this is where I want to try to point our efforts?
Well, with the caveat of what you said about all the reporting is done and everything is perfect, I would probably say, and let me preface this by saying, things not being efficient drive me absolutely crazy. That's kind of why I'm in this job, is I constantly strive to be efficient and improve efficiency. And so if I could get everything on board and have perfect, I would make operations as efficient as humanly possible. And what I mean by that is, all of our lines run world-class OEE with no hiccups, and everything runs to this certain schedule. We get all the PMs done. If we go into the cooler, every truck that we send out is a full truck, and every pallet that we make is a full pallet. There's no making mixed pallets or partial pallets or anything like that. The big constraint we have with that is a lot of that's money. Is you could put world-class OEE in, but you're ripping out every line and you're putting state-of-the-art, millions of dollars worth of investment to make everything fully automated and, bring in robotics and all that sort of thing. And our product is perishable. So it has to stay, at 36 degrees from the time it's made to the time it's consumed. So that's a constraint on shipping. So our customer may not have a certain volume for a certain item. And so they, instead of ordering a full pallet, they put it as a layer. And so you have to break down that pallet from 5 layers or 4 layers down to 2 or 3. And, sometimes that leads to where you don't ship a full truck, you ship a half a truck. And all of that just drives me nuts. And so if I could fix anything and have everything running, I would make this place so efficient that I would work myself out of a job.
That's the goal, right? Work yourself out of a job, but don't tell anybody. Just
right.
Have it running in the background there. Perfect. Yeah, I think that's a valiant goal, an exciting goal, especially for somebody in your role there, Derek. Derek, you and I met, I think, a couple of years ago now. It's been at a conference, at an Informs conference, and I see you on LinkedIn. You frequently post some of these your thoughts around analytics. I've seen you head to a bunch of other conferences. Can you talk about, as a speaker as well? Can you talk about your role as a speaker? Do you have anything upcoming? Are you looking for things?
Yeah, one of my favorite things to do is to go and talk about analytics. And so I've spoken at a couple in the past, but I'm going to be speaking at the University of Alabama Analytics Symposium October the 4th. And so you can catch me there, or you can follow me on LinkedIn, and I'll be happy to accept your connection.
Perfect. All right. To all the listeners out there, if you're interested in Derek's world in operations analytics there at Milo's Tea, give him a follow on LinkedIn. Stay up to date when he'll be speaking again. Derek, thanks so much for coming on the Minding Your Own Business podcast today.
Oh, thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.